So here we are back in Painter 12, going to finish up this rendering, finish all the details, and getting it to look like a finished design sketch here. So now that I've kind of defined a lot of the areas, now I'm going to go in and detail out some stuff. I'm going to first start out here by fixing my ellipses on the that shock tower thing right there. And again, I'm using my ellipse guides right on my monitor, as I have that Wacom Cintiq tablet. So this is just a really quick way for me to get a perfect ellipse. So what I did there, I just gave myself my guideline for the center guideline coming up through the ellipse. Basically, that's your minor axis again coming up through there. Same axis as you use on your wheels. And I think I'm going to add some red details here, just to kind of tie in with the engine a little bit, and again creating some interest for the eyes to look at. Anytime you throw some warm color in there, your eye will gravitate towards it. Then I'm going to go over here on the other side, and it's going to be slightly saturated or desaturated down on that side. Again, just like the orange wheel where I toned it way back. So you can tell that I just laid in the base color, and then I went back and erased the edges to give it a more crisp detail on there. Now I'm going to go here and play around with the glow brush, and what I'm doing is I'm adding a colored highlight to the top of to the edge of the metal. And so I'm thinking this metal is probably like a warm type metal, kind of like titanium. So I get a warm highlight, which is kind of a yellowish, orangish highlight, and adding that all to the edges of the mechanical detailed area, as if all this stuff is built out of titanium. So you can see that when you start putting on that colored highlight, it really gives it a metallic finish to it, a metallic look. And again, using that glow brush. That glow brush works really neat. But it works a little different than the color dodge in Photoshop. To get a really good glow out of it, you actually turn the color down to a darker color. Versus Photoshop, you actually get a little bit better color out of it when you turn it to a lighter color. Like just below white usually on Photoshop, whereas this one acts a little different. And the one in Painter is actually better because it's picking up all the colors underneath the glow brush. Oh, and the other thing you have to do too when you use this glow brush, you have to use it on the layer that your object is on, so it reads all the color right. If you do it over the top of it on a floating layer, it'll just put down the color you chose, but it doesn't make it the right glow to it. I don't know how else to explain it. So here I'm going in, adding some. I'm going to start working on these wheels, give them some definition. I chose to make the wheels spinning, so I don't really put a lot of effort into the actual design of the wheel. So again, here I'm using the glow brush to lay down some highlights on the wheel, make it look like it's spinning. Gonna put some bolt holes basically around the edge, make them look like they're spinning again. So here I'm going to take that area and darken it in, and I'm going to add a almost like a spinner in there. Oh, kind of like the other face peeler that I was working on in Photoshop. Kind of a similar type of wheel setup in there. So I was thinking of this red anodized center that comes out. So you can see I keep going back and forth using that glow brush. So you can see I put a little bit of a, indication of that same wheel setup in the back. And I decide here that there's not enough contrast to really show much dish in that wheel, so I go back in and darken it down a little bit, just to give it some more contrast so that there's more shadow in there. It was looking a little too flat. You can see when you use that glow brush how it does some neat stuff as far as putting some really hot, bright highlights on it. And here you saw me draw that line, and that line that I drew is actually the light path of, sort of the reflection coming across the wheel and down. Because you usually want your highlights to match up along surfaces. So now I'm going to add some depth to this wheel on the other side here. I'm going to start by using my ellipse templates again. Drawing the, almost like as if there's an inner break, kind of like a disc break in there. And just really darkening it in, leaving a little imagination to the viewer's eye. Not putting a lot of detail inside there. Not really totally necessary. Almost just enough to give an indication of something in there. So I'm going to go in and add some panel lines here to start giving some more definition to the body. As you can see, the more and more details that you start adding to this thing, the more realistic it starts to look. As if it was man-made, put together by maybe by the driver or some crew or something like that. It's just a matter of trial and error too. Like some of those panel lines, I didn't like the way it was going on there, so erased them. Start playing with it again. Again, just leaving them really light too. You don't want them too thick and heavy. If you observe, the way airplanes were made, you can see the panel lines, but they're really faint. So you can see I'm going through and experimenting again with some of my brushes that I have to find the right one. And I'm messing with that the general brush setup and playing with the different settings and seeing what I could come up with here. What I needed was more of an opaque brush. and I was using the pencil to try to do it. And the way the pencil initially comes in is it's actually what they call a soft buildup. So the more you put down line, it actually starts to cover over it, and it gets darker and darker. And so I wanted to get rid of that in this brush so that I could use it for a more of a solid opaque color instead of a transparent type color. So I was tuning up that front area there. So I actually went in and I messed around with this earlier, and I made a brush called the Photoshop Brush 1 and 2. Like I said, they're kind of similar to the way the hard edge one works in Photoshop. And I do that for a couple reasons. One is, like I said before, I talked about my workflow, and when I do production work, that I like to be as fast as possible and not mess around with brushes and stuff. So, I like to do stuff that I'm familiar with, so I actually made a brush that's similar to the way the Photoshop one works. And it helps me to, focus on getting my design done versus playing with brushes. Now, when I'm doing artwork and stuff, that's a whole different story. I will play around with a lot of the brushes in Painter and look at there's some great brushes in here. That watercolor tool that they have in Painter 12 is amazing. And I'd love to get to know that a little bit more. I've seen some artists do some stuff that's just mind-blowing with that thing. And even the oils, too. Really cool stuff. So, that stuff's really neat to use when you're doing more of an art piece versus a design piece. So now I'm going to go in and add some rivets, some fine details in there. Now this is one of those I did it earlier on in Photoshop where I created a brush that gave the dots by changing the spacing. You could actually do that in here in Painter too, but I just was working fast and I just went with it. One of the things I also did here, you saw me add the highlights to the rivets, and that was using that lock, the transparency lock. And what that does is it only highlights the object within that layer, and it'll only color that. It won't color around it or anything. It's pretty cool. There's stuff like that in Photoshop too. So right now I'm going to go in and add some texture to the front of this thing by using the square hard pastel, because it has texture in it already. And so I was thinking the front of this vehicle, if it's out there doing land speed records or racing and stuff, it's going to have dust and sand and dirt, and even the salt and stuff would be pelting the front and scraping off the paint. And so I'm adding that texture on the front where it might be pitted and damaged a little bit. Then I'm also adding some kind of maybe some oil spilled through those holes there and went running down the side of the vehicle. And so I go in and just add that detail of the as if, or even smoke or something kind of came out those holes, and it kind of stained the body there. And I did that using the same texture brush to change the colors, and then erased out kind of what I didn't want. Then I go back in and add in some of the highlights again so that you can read that edge well. Now I'm going to do some smoke coming out the back. I mean, coming out the pipes there. I'm keeping it real environmentally friendly. This is definitely not a hybrid race car. But hey, in the future we took care of global warming and all that stuff, and it's all good to go. So we can pollute the air again. Actually, I'm just messing. I'm just having fun. But but it is smoke coming out the side pipes. A little bit of old technology mixed with some new stuff. Plus, the adding the smoke there also adds some sense of speed, as if the thing was blown out stuff, but it's traveling down the road at the same time. So you have that smoke trail that's kind of coming out of it. I don't put a lot of effort into the smoke, but just enough that you can kind of tell that's what's going on there. So still kind of working on that front area, kind of marking it up. And when you add these kind of details to your designs, it just adds to partly the functionality, and it also adds to the aesthetic. It looks used. It looks like it was raced in the desert already, and this guy's taken it out a few times. So you can see this is where I do have some of these textured brushes in my palette to use so that I can create things like this. So obviously, thinking about the way this thing would function, since that front end's pointed towards the sand or the salt the most, it's going to really get marred up on those edges. So I pretty much chipped away all the paint off of that. So just now I'm going to work on the guy in the back. Let's make him look a little more, like he's really in there instead of just a sketch. So I'm thinking of a brown leather helmet that he's wearing, kind of like from the old 40s World War II pilots and stuff. So just going in and adding some detail of that leather cap, and then also the goggles and stuff too. So changing the design just a little bit. And really, this is another kind of indication technique as well, that just going in and kind of making areas look like they're defined, but really not spending a lot of time noodling the thing, because it's more about showing the design of the vehicle versus the guy that's actually in there. That would be kind of more of the character designer's part, where they would draw the guy that actually drives this vehicle, or even my part too. It depends on what I'm assigned to do or what my job is at the time. So I'm thinking about this tire and thinking that it's just a little too smooth. So I was trying to see if I could add a better highlight, or I got that texture on there, and I was thinking about that texture on the tire, but ultimately the thing's moving, so you're not going to really pick up a lot of detail either. So you can see how much those, those little added touch really start to add to the actual vehicle. Now I'm thinking about, adding some more orange on the body just to kind of complement the wheels. So I thought about this, kind of this double stripe that goes across the hood of the vehicle, and I just draw that in there with um, I drew it in there with my marker brush again, and then just erasing to create some hard edges, and then I'll go in and manipulate the layer so it changes the properties of that stripe that I just drew, and I'm trying to get it to look like it's actually part of the vehicle. So that's the one I settle on, and I believe that's just overlay. And you can see how the highlight still goes through the orange stripes, and it looks like it's actually laying on there. So I'm getting close to being done with this piece now. What I need to do next is start to add a shadow in there, just to give this thing, so it looks like he's sitting on the ground. I really don't have much of a shadow under there right now. So a lot of times I'll just go in and add some dark areas underneath the car, and then I go in and change the layer properties again, whether it be multiply or overlay or whatever it is, to basically create this dark area on the ground. And I use that technique instead of changing the color of my brush, just because it's simple, it's fast. I can lay down the color really quick, and so you can kind of see how that looks like a shadow now, without a lot of work. And then I'll come back and erase the parts that I need to get rid of, so it looks like it's lined up right and with the car and stuff. So here I'm using a line tool to kind of straighten up some of the edges. Or I was using the brush. I'm sorry. I was using there's a different selection up there, that you can either use the brush as a, free flowing, or you can get it to make straight edges. And I had it on the straight edge thing, and I kind of was testing it out. And I use it just for a couple areas, just to give myself a straight line. So going in with my digital airbrush again and getting some shadows in areas that I didn't have it. Kind of lightening up that rear shadow. You noticed my other drawing that I did in Photoshop, I try to make the shadow darker towards the front and then get lighter towards the back of the car, and that just adds depth again. So now I'm kind of playing with the different layer properties, and I realized that I painted my shadow the wrong color in the front there. So I had to go in and I put it back to normal, and then uh, I color picked the shadow color so I could get the right color in there. So here I'm messing with the different layer properties. I think I end up just going with I end up just lightening it with the opacity. I and not worry about the different layer properties. So this is another way to add speed to your vehicle is you add these almost these stroke lines to the front of it as if the shadow's catching on different textures on the ground. But you can add speed this way. Make it look like it's moving. So this is getting really close to being done here. Going to be wrapping it up. Finishing up the shadow work here and call it a done drawing. Or a done rendering, I should say. You know, obviously you could take this thing even further and further. That's the crazy thing about digital is you can probably get extremely detailed with the stuff that you draw. I tend to like to you know, get stuff done and move on to something else and spend effort into another design, moving on to the next one. As I get ready to wrap this thing up, I'd like to thank everybody for surviving this tutorial. I hope it wasn't too long for people. And go ahead and feel free to write me with your questions anytime. You can find me on Facebook, and that's Facebook/mastersofchickenscratch.com. And you can also find me on my website, mastersofchickenscratch.com. And I also have another website, which is my freelance website, and that's futureelements.net. I also wanted to let you guys know that I've included the files on the DVD, and I actually saved the Painter file as a PSD file so you can open it in Photoshop. And I also saved it as a JPEG file because I know everybody doesn't have the programs that I used. But if you're able to open it in Photoshop, you can see all the layers. If not, you can look at the JPEG, and either one of those files are going to show more detail than the video will. So I'm going to sign it and date it, and I just want to thank you all for watching the tutorial, and I hope you learned something out of it.